We Get Outdoors Nation. Today I get the privilege of having somebody who probably will blush when I say this, but a genuine expert in the house. I've been following this guy and his exploits for probably longer than he realizes. In fact, I may well be his number one fan and stalker. But today we have outdoor living, bushcraft, survival guru, and probably many other things, Mr. Paul Kirtley with us. Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for having me. Great to be here. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Paul, whereabouts do we find you today?
I am in my secret man cave, hiding away from COVID in the south of England. So yes, it's my kind of my library, my study. It's where I do a lot of my work. I'm surrounded by outdoor books and plant books and bushcraft books and all manner of interesting things that I'm sure your audience would love to get their hands on. So it's my little kind of think space and working space and where I record podcasts and all that kind of stuff. So,
excellent. Yeah. It seems that a lot of people who do what you do have their man cave full of trinkets and toys. I was talking to Will Lord the other day. You probably know Will.
I do know Will, yes.
And Will kept disappearing from his man cave to come back with ancient trinkets of Venus and Venus Waldorf or something like that from Vienna, and all sorts of weird and wonderful things from 30,000 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to have a little tour. It's almost like he's got his own little mini museum where he used to live. I have had the pleasure of having, a personal guided tour of all of his artifacts and, things that are old and things that he's made that replicate museum pieces and archaeological finds and whatnot. So yeah, fascinating stuff.
It's phenomenal. Go speak to him now. He's building a roundhouse in COVID. That's his thing.
So it's a while since I've spoken to him, actually.
Yeah, he's a funny guy. See, how did you end up earning your living in the great outdoors? I mean, not very many people achieve that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky, and it's good that you mentioned that because it is a tricky thing. A lot of people who are involved in outdoor education of all sorts of different types do it for the love of it. It's not always easy to make a living from it. It's great if you can manage to marry those two things together. And I kind of moved gradually across to it being a living. So it was something. I always had a passion for nature and being outdoors. I grew up in the countryside. I was born in Yorkshire. Then we moved to North Wales when I was 5. And I had the absolute fantastic honor and pleasure and privilege of having a massive forest directly behind where we lived. So I could literally climb over the garden fence and go straight into a really big forestry commission forest full of mature trees and roam around up there. So I kind of grew up, just going out into the woods. But nobody ever really showed me any skills when I was a kid in that sense, other than one of my uncles who actually lived in South Africa a lot of the time. He'd been in the merchant navy, and I remember him specifically. He came to visit and stay once with my cousins, and he brought a rope and he cut it in half and says, "Here, Paul, you can have half of this." And then he proceeded to teach me some knots, which were the first knots, other than tying my shoelaces, are the first knots I remember anybody teaching me. So round turn and 2 half hitches and all sorts of stuff. He showed how to make a monkey's fist. I couldn't remember how to do it afterwards, but he could do all of those sort of naval knots and whatnot. And that kind of got me interested in knots. But my parents were keen hikers. It's one of the reasons they moved to North Wales, because they love nature, they love being outdoors, they love the coast, they love the mountains. So I kind of grew up with quite an outdoorsy childhood, really. And then we moved back to the northeast of England, again in a rural area. And until I went to university in Edinburgh, I'd never lived in a town. I always lived at most a small village. And so I just grew up outdoors, doing outdoor stuff. And this is sort of I got a ZX Spectrum computer, 48K when I was about 13, something like that, 11, 12, 13. I can't remember exactly. But we only ever used to get it out when it was raining. That was the thing you did when you couldn't go outside. Yeah. It was too horrible to go outside. We'd get hypothermia. Then we'd get the computer out. We were that generation. So otherwise we were outside on our bikes in the woods running around. So I guess it was kind of ingrained in me quite early on to love being outdoors. And I went to university. I did mathematics at university because, you don't have to write essays when you do maths. So that was quite good. You just have to do some sums. So I did university in Edinburgh, which was great because I sort of became familiar with the Scottish Highlands then. You know, I started jumping on the train and hiking and doing Munros and all those sorts of things. And so I'd always done outdoor stuff. And then I ended up working, you know, long story short, I ended up working in London in a financial job because I was a numerate graduate and I was skint. So I went and did that. But I was always sort of frustrated with being indoors all the time. And so then I started, as well as carrying on doing hiking trips and stuff in my holidays and whatnot, I'd had an interest since I was a kid. And as I say, this is a long story short, so I've kind of jumped over a few things, but I'd had an interest since I was a kid in survival skills. My dad had got me Lofty Wiseman's Survival Handbook when I was 13.
I was just about to mention that big white book, with the black and white on the front. You've still got it somewhere, I bet.
Yeah. It's where is it? Where is it? It's I've got so many flipping books here now. It is. It's up there somewhere. I'm perturbed. I can't see where it is at the moment. It's
like a part of your identity's been.
I know. It's like, where's it gone? I am perturbed. It's around somewhere. I've had it out recently. That's why it's not there. But anyway, Lofty Wiseman's Survival Handbook. And as I say, I lived in the northeast of England, and it was a small village. And I had a couple of friends one of whom ended up in the military. And we used to love going out and building dens and trying to make traps and all sorts of stuff. And then I got Lofty Wiseman's Survival Handbook, and we started trying to do stuff out there. And we all made little survival tins and all those kind of things that, you know, teenage boys do, or at least did back then, certainly. And that was a big inspiration. And then I got into hiking and whatnot more. And then I got to a certain point where I was like, I would like to actually properly learn a few more survival skills, because I'm going off and doing solo hiking trips, not just in the UK, but in Europe as well. This was sort of in my late teens, early 20s. And I'm like, I can sort of light a fire, and I know that you should boil water if it's suspicious and all of these sorts of things, but I would actually like to learn a little bit more. And then the other strand to that was when I'd lived in North Wales in particular, but also subsequently, my parents are both keen gardeners, and they'd introduced me to, I guess unknowingly, they'd introduced me to various plants. You know, like in Wales, we had wild strawberries growing in amongst the rockery, and my parents had told me they were edible. So I remember doing a hiking trip in the Pyrenees Mountains, which run between, in case people don't know, they're listening, it runs between France and Spain, basically, and mountain range right across that part of Europe. And we didn't have time to go and do a hike right through the Pyrenees. You're still one of my aspirations, actually, to one day walk from one end of the Pyrenees to the other. I've just never had the time to do it. But anyway, we went and did about a 10, 12-day hiking trip in the Pyrenees, and we sort of linked up a bit of the high route and one of the low routes on the Spanish side to do this loop. And I remember we were camped, myself and a university friend, Mike. We were camped in this nice sort of alpine sort of meadow. I know it's not in the Alps, but this kind of high meadow that clearly had a shepherd with sheep and whatnot there at some point in the past, because there was an old barn, sort of like not quite a shack, but like just a single roomed stone building with a slate roof. And it was all dilapidated, and the slate roof had come off. And where the slate roof had come off behind this building, it was kind of like what we had in Wales, all sort of slate and grass, and in amongst there were growing wild strawberries. So we were camped in this meadow, and I'd gone off for a wander after dinner, just around looking at this building and looking at what was about, because it was a lovely summer's evening. And I got my metal mug, and I sort of filled it with like half a pint of wild strawberries, you know, and came back to my friend Mike, and I said, wow, it's amazing. I found these wild strawberries. And I knew I'd tried a couple already, but the flavor, if you've never tried a wild strawberry, the flavor is so much more intense than a cultivated strawberry, which can be quite, you know, they can be quite watery often. Compared to that, you've got this sort of condensed, concentrated strawberry flavor in these lovely little strawberries, but they don't look like cultivated strawberries. They're really small. And Mike was really skeptical. He was like, no, they don't look like strawberries. They're too small to be strawberries. I'm like, no, these are wild strawberries. He's like, well, you go ahead and eat them. But so I didn't try and convince him too hard, because I knew how good they were. And if he didn't want to share them, that was his problem. So that was I remember that specifically because that was a moment in time when I was also thinking about learning more about survival skills. And I was like, I wonder what else there is around here that I could be enjoying, as a wild food. I didn't know a lot about greens and, different, leafy plants and things you could eat at that point. So it was also on my agenda. I was like, I want to know more about how I can use the resources that are around me, both in terms of fallback skills. If my stove fails and I really need to heat a meal, or we need a fire and, somebody's hypothermic or whatever, from a survival perspective, that was at the back of my mind about wanting to learn more about survival skills. But then also it was just like, I'm here, I've chosen to be here, I'm doing this hike. And yes, we've got our, dehydrated food and our stove and our tent and whatnot, but what is there here that we can make use of and enjoy along the way? And so there were these two kind of allied motivations to start learning more formally, if you like. And so I did actually write off to Lofty Wiseman and say, because he used to have a survival school in Devon. And I wrote off to
on one of his courses.
Have you? Well,
lucky. Yeah, when I was in my early teens. Yeah.
Right. 15, so
15ish.
Yeah, he'd stopped teaching at that point. So I kind of got a short note back saying, sorry, Lofty doesn't do that anymore. So then a little while later, I became aware of the fact that Ray Mears was teaching skills at a place called Woodlore. Now, I'd seen Ray on Country Tracks and World of Survival on television. So this was in the 1990s. And I happened upon a very early website of theirs, again, probably about 1997, 1998, around about that time. And I registered, I got some information, and this was back in the day. This is how long ago it was. It was a website that was a couple of pages, and it basically said, if you would like more information on what we do, please write to this address and we will send you a brochure. Yeah. It was like a kind of ad in the back of a magazine, just transposed onto the internet. So I wrote off to this PO box and I got a little brochure with the courses in, and I was like, oh, that looks interesting actually. So I booked on one, and it wasn't Ray who ran that one. It was John Ryder and Ben McNutt actually who ran that. John was running it and Ben was the assistant. And so John. John. Well, there you go. Again, small world. So that was the first kind of bushcraft course I went on at Woodlore. And then I did quite a few after that. You sort of a couple every year for the next few years. And most of those were with Ray, because that was back in the day. That was like 20 years ago, back in the day when he was still running all of the UK courses largely. And Juha Rankinen as well. And then I did an Arctic course in 2003 with him and Lars Falt up in the north of Sweden. And by that point, Ray kind of knew me to talk to and whatnot. And I'd done some extra things on that course because I'd done some of the courses with him. So, for example, that particular winter we went, there wasn't a lot of snow. And so we couldn't really easily build quinzies where you pile up the snow and let it freeze and then dig it out, because it was quite a thin layer of snow. It was quite unusual, apparently. And I've been back there many times since, and I can say it definitely was unusual. So we had to build a different type of shelter, but it was very similar to a shelter I'd made in coniferous forest on one of the other courses in the UK, in Scotland. And so I said to Ray, well, if we're using coniferous materials, rather than building this sort of teepee style shelter, can we build a lean-to? Because I've never built a lean-to. Can we do a lean-to with a long log fire in front? And he was like, as long as you do a good job of it. And I was like, okay. So, the rest of my group, the four or five of us, can't remember how many were in a group now, but at least four of us, we were happy. They were all happy to do it. And because the other groups are building the other types of shelters, everyone got to see the different types. And so we built ours big enough to take two people, so that we could have two people in one night and two people in another night. And so we got to work building this lean-to, and we did do a good job of it. And Ray decided to take photographs of it, and it actually ended up in one of his books. So I think that's probably good testament to the fact it was good. But then it also led to a conversation that I had with him on the way home from that trip, because we were both transiting through Stockholm Airport at the same time. And he came over, we were sat waiting for a connecting flight, we're having a coffee, and he came over and said, I've been thinking, would you like to come and assist me on some courses in the UK? And I said, well, yes, I'd love to. That'd be fantastic. So that was how my career started, really. So it went from something that was an interest So something that I became more and more passionate about. I was doing quite a lot of courses, learning about the different aspects around those courses, working on my tree and plant ID and all those things. And then I got to this point where he noticed me, and I was, you know, and he wanted me to come and help him. And so then I started, and it was only weekends and holidays initially. So that was 2003. And I started assisting him a bit, but mainly Juha Rankinen, who's a really skilled Swedish guy who used to work at Woodlore for many years. And he went off and set up an outdoor college in Sweden. And he's done a lot of very interesting stuff since. He was briefly on one of my podcasts from Sweden a while ago. But a lot of people don't know his name, but he's one of those people that is very low profile, but very skillful in the bushcraft and outdoor living world. And so I learned a lot from him as well. And then roll forward a couple of years of doing that sort of part-time, I was then offered a full-time job as course director at Woodlore. And so I then went and did that. And I worked full-time with Ray for about 5 years then, until 2010. And then I left because I'd pretty much done everything that I'd been asked to do. And Ray's interest is television, and my interest was I wanted to expand more and do more outdoor teaching and do more overseas trips and various things. So we parted company then, and then I set up Frontier Bushcraft, which is my own company, and we've just celebrated our 10th anniversary of Frontier Bushcraft in December, so December 2020, which is 10 years since I incorporated the company. So that's how I kind of got to where I am. It was, you know, I had a childhood in the countryside. Being outdoors was in my blood, clearly. I did have a career in sort of finance for a while, but then as soon as I had the opportunity to flip my hobbies and passions and interests into my job, even though it was actually a massive pay cut, I didn't hesitate. I just ran with it, and I've been doing it ever since. So, it hasn't been easy. Running your own business, as you know, is not an easy thing to do. And
it's an adventure all on its own, eh?
It is an adventure all on its own. But I think if you've got a survival mindset that you're not going to give up, and you just break things down into manageable steps, and you do the next most important thing that you have to do, and you don't take too big risks, but take risks where you need to, and you kind of get there in the end. But you know, you need to start off with a lot more money than you think you do, and everything takes much longer than you think it's going to. Apart from that, it all worked out fine. So
people often say to me, you know, why do businesses fail? And I'm going, the idea is great, but people run out of money really quickly.
Yes. Yeah. And you can run out of money really quickly by just spending it on stuff that you don't really need to spend it on, but you think you do. And then after a while, you realize you can bootstrap things or find a different way. So,
when I set up my first outdoor business, Paul, I spent all of my savings on lots of shiny, irrelevant shit. That would be the best way of describing it. Like, I had vehicles that were beautifully branded and 4x4, and Haglof's clothing for everybody that was all like pimped up with the logo. And I spent an absolute fortune. And then when we opened the doors and properly started trading, something was missing, and it was the customers.
Yeah.
And I spent the first 2 winters working on a building site Monday through Friday, laboring. So I didn't have to pay myself a wage, but I could afford to keep the business going and pay other people. And then I worked every evening and weekend to try and keep the business going. And I think if I'd not bought so much shiny shit, probably the life would have been a lot quicker and a lot easier.
I think we've all been through those sorts of phases early on where we think we need things, and I'm not sure there's a way around that. You kind of have to learn a different mentality, don't you? And until you get there, you don't realize that the old mentality was wrong. So
that's it. So you've mentioned all sorts of words joined together all around the same thing. So you've used survival, bushcraft, outdoor living, edibles. Is that all bushcraft, or is bushcraft something else?
I would say if you want a definition of bushcraft from me, the best one that I can give you is that it's a skill set that you use when you choose to be in the outdoors, as opposed to wanting to get home. Where survival is more aimed at, you know, staying alive until you can get out of there. Now, I think a lot of survival skills are actually a subset of bushcraft skills. I think a lot of survival is encompassed by bushcraft, not all of it, particularly at the more technological end of modern survival. I think maybe some of that isn't bushcraft, particularly at the military end, when you're talking about, types of beacons and UV, and infrared beacons and all sorts of things, and specialist signaling devices and all those sorts of things. That's very much, escape, it's kind of the escape and evasion, the seer end of survival. But I think in terms of use of natural resources, I would say that the survival skills sit within bushcraft, because they're the same skills. The context is just different. If you need to make water safe, if you need to light a fire, if you need to make a signal fire, whatever, it's the same skill set. It's just the big difference is what's going on in your head in those situations, whether you're lighting a fire at the end of a day's canoeing in Algonquin on a lovely autumn's day, and you're there and you're well fed and you're not injured and you're not scared and people know where you are. That's very different to lighting a fire if you need it to stop your mate dying from hypothermia, or creating a signal fire or what have you, because you want to be rescued. The mental stresses there are very different, but the actual fundamental skill set in terms of using the natural materials are exactly the same. So I would say a lot of survival skills are encompassed within bushcraft. I wouldn't say that bushcraft is encompassed within survival. Bushcraft really is something that makes the outdoors home. So if particularly where they draw on indigenous skills, where all the bushcraft skills draw on indigenous skills, we all used to live in the middle of nature all the time. Nature is not against us. It's not for us. It's just there. And it's up to us with our skills and our knowledge and our understanding of what's going on around us to make ourselves comfortable and be at home there. We're an animal. And we were very good at living in nature for a long time. And now we've got very good at doing other things and maybe not so good at living in nature, many of us. But, fundamentally, there's no reason why we can't be completely comfortable with a skill set and a certain knowledge base out in nature. And a lot of what I think is transposed into bushcraft are elements of that. And then you've got the other thing that you've got is this, and Lisa Fenton is somebody that's done a good job of bringing this to the fore. Dr. Lisa Fenton, who some listeners might know from, she's the co-chair of the next Global Bushcraft Symposium with me. She's been on my podcast talking about these things as well. But one of the things that she's sort of highlighted is the sort of expeditionary, the colonial kind of nature of some of what's in bushcraft. We got to a certain point with, particularly when you start thinking about, Robert Rogers and the French and Indian War, you got to sort of expeditionary warfare, guerrilla warfare, right through to the Boer War. And then you got people like Baden-Powell coming back with those skills and starting the scouting movement. You've got people like Frederick Russell Burnham, who was a scout for the US military, but then went and fought in the Boer War for the British and had some contact with Baden-Powell as well. So you've got this sort of need to have these skills that can be transposed from one place to another, that can be carried with you. And a lot of them are influenced and draw on indigenous skills for those environments, but they need to be widely applicable as well. And I think a lot of what we teach in bushcraft now, certainly at the baseline, are widely applicable outdoor skills. Like, how do you make a fire? How do you make a bow drill set? How do you make cordage when you've got plant fibers? How do you navigate using nature's signs? How do you make water safe? Most of those things you can apply anywhere, as long as the material, the baseline materials are there. They're not so specific to particular natural resources that only occur in one place. And I think a lot of the baseline bushcraft skills are like that. And then, of course, you've got very, very much more specific skills in particular environments, like certain things you can only find in, Southern California, or in the boreal forest up in Canada and maybe in Scandinavia as well. You get an analogous material up there, like spruce roots or something. You're only going to get where you get spruce trees, but spruce trees are quite widespread. So that's probably still quite a baseline skill to have. But then other things, it's very particular to that place. Some of the plants that grow in Australia only grow in particular parts of Australia, and they don't grow anywhere else in the world. And unless you know that plant and how to use it, then you're not going to be able to transpose that knowledge from somewhere else to that particular plant. Which one, and then when you get onto foods, it's very much the case. Again, some are very widespread. Like cattails or bulrushes, or whatever you want to call them, Tifa latifolia, very widespread. That's a plant you'd want to know early on, because you find it in lots of places. And very similar species, kumbungi, that's you get that in Australia. You get similar species in South Africa. And so those are the things you want to know first. But then once you get beyond those very widespread plants, you've got to kind of know the particular local environment, like which plant has a root that has these poisonous beetles on that you can collect to make a toxin for your bow hunting, for example, in parts of Africa, or, where are we going to find witchetty grubs in Australia? Those are not skills that you can apply in Quebec, for example, but some of the bushcraft skills are. So some of it's very broad based. And I would say in some ways, the most important bushcraft skills have become the ones that you can apply pretty much anywhere where there are woody, fibrous plants and whatnot. But then you get more and more specific to the environment. So, and of course, clearly then when you start thinking about it, there are massive overlaps with survival skills because they allow you to survive even if you don't want to be there. But I would say the distinction with bushcraft skills are that they allow you to be comfortable. The scary wilds become home when you have enough bushcraft skills, even if you're not used to being in that particular environment. So I would say, that's where wilderness living skills comes into that. Not sure, there's kind of, in some ways that's a broader term still, is knowing how to put up a tent, is that a wilderness living skill? Is knowing how to, cross a river, is that bushcraft, or is that a wilderness living skill? I don't know. There's a kind of gray area there. And in some senses, it doesn't matter. I think what matters is that you know how to do the stuff that you want to be able to do. And you get good instruction, good training. You get mentored by people who know what they're doing, whether they're old hands, that have learned the hard way in the bush, or whether they've been through an established, system of training, like in, water sports or what have you, that we have now. You don't want to be learning by mistake how to, canoe down a whitewater river. You want to learn from somebody who knows what they're doing, and then hopefully you then pass that on to other people. So, but anyway, I mean, yeah, it's interesting. But to me, at the heart of bushcraft, it's a knowledge of nature. It's a knowledge of nature, and it is practical knowledge of nature. So it's a knowledge of how to use these things in a practical fashion. So you're not like a botanist where you're interested in everything from a notate, you want to note it down and study it from a scientific point of view. You want to know, okay, well, that is a particular type of plant, or that's a particular type of tree, or that's the track of a particular animal. And then you want to make practical use of that for your own material benefit, for your own physical well-being, to feed yourself, to feed your family, to whatever. It's about that practical use of a knowledge of nature. It doesn't mean to say you shouldn't have a scientific, curious mindset and all of those sorts of things, but fundamentally it's a deep knowledge and study of nature combined with practical skills. And that's the thing. It isn't just knowing how to do things or knowing that you can do things. It's actually practicing them as well. It's like you can read a magazine article and know that you can turn particular types of wood by rubbing them together into a pile of hot dust. And then you can take that pile of hot dust and take some of the fibrous plant materials and blow that into a flame. And then you can take some small sticks from a tree and make that into a fire. It's very different knowing that you can do that to actually being able to do it. And so it's a world apart. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I get a little bit frustrated with sometimes. There's a raft of YouTube material now with all these skills on, and there are people watching it who, because they've watched it, they think they know how to do it. And I think that's a dangerous trap to get into. Now, a little knowledge can go a long way sometimes, and there are certainly survival stories of people who've had like half a day's classroom survival training, and that saved their lives. So I'm not saying it's totally useless to know about the fact that you can do something, but really what you want is to then practice the skills as well, so that you're you're getting over the pitfalls and the learning process, and you're getting the muscle memory and all those other things that you need. So I think the craft part sometimes gets left out. The craft part of bushcraft is really important, that you can use a knife safely. You know, we've seen some of these survival shows where people have been extracted from the show quite early on because they've injured themselves with a cutting tool or what have you. And, you know, there's a foundational level of competence that you need in using things, not losing them, keeping things attached to your person, not cutting yourself. That's just basic tool use. And then there's all the knowledge of nature that you need to have practiced.
Yeah, there was the Alone episode where the guy lost his ferro rod. I don't know if you saw that one, and just I think it was a guy lost his ferro rod, and that was him done after a couple of days.
That's actually happened a couple of times on that show.
Has it?
Yeah.
Okay, I always remember that, and I was like, yeah, that's I don't understand, because for me personally, I'm quite particular when I get in the outdoors with my equipment, and when I use something, it comes from a special place and always goes back to a special place before I move on to step 2 or step 3 or whatever it might be, and that just shows a lack of care and attention, I suppose. Or
yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I'm the same as you. I'm the sort of person, for me, I have a place for everything and everything in its place. And that's actually going back to Lofty. I remember reading in Lofty's book about checking, you know, when I can almost remember it, when it was something like, when you're walking in close country, regularly check that you still have your knife or your parang or whatever, however he phrases it, on your person. And that was long before I'd ever been to any particularly wild places, but I had that image in your mind of kind of going through the jungle and brushing through bushes and just checking that you've got that really important tool on your person. And that's something that now is borne out in the way that I do things, for sure, with my own experiences. And I've made YouTube videos about this, like how I have things attached to my person. I've got a ferro rod attached on a piece of cord. I've got a knife in the sheath. The sheath, you can invert it. The knife won't fall out. And then the classic one that we see all the time, and I think this might be what happened in the show, I don't remember, and I see it with students when they're doing firelighting exercises on courses, they will use whatever they're using to light a fire. It might be a box of matches, it might be a ferro rod and a striker, it might be a flint and steel onto a piece of char cloth, whatever. But as soon as they've achieved that next stage, whether it's got that little piece of char cloth glowing, or whether they've got a spark dropped onto a piece of birch bark and that's starting to burn, or whether they've taken the match and popped a flame nicely underneath some very fine twigs, they forget about the thing that they were just using. They literally, you see them, like their brain switches to the next thing and they'll drop it on the floor. You see it all the time. You know, box of matches, strike the match, they cut the match, they'll go take it down the light, and then they drop the box of matches on the damp ground, you know? See, or, you know,
we've both seen it hundreds of times.
Yeah, knife with a ferro rod, you know, they'll drop a spark onto the birch bark. The spark takes, it starts to burn, and they want to stop the birch bark from curling up. And so they'll drop the knife and the ferro rod on the ground in amongst the leaf litter and then those things are there, you know, ready to get lost. Or with a knife, it can be, you know, a hazard in terms of them injuring themselves if they kneel on it or whatever as they're moving around. And so one of the things I try and get my students to do, you know, we definitely point out, look, you just dropped that, pick it up. But just to get into the habit of, as soon as that thing is lit, put those things back where they should be. Yeah, knife back in the sheath, whatever it is back in your pocket, and then you've got that couple of seconds to do that. And if it isn't still going, then you did something wrong. You know, if it's not still burning, and that's really important. And I think unless you train to do that when you're not particularly stressed, then when you're stressed, you won't remember to do it. And you have to train as you would. And, you know, it doesn't have to be a survival situation. It could just be a cold, manky day where you really need to get the fire going after you've been in a canoe for 3 hours. It's been raining. You know, this situation where you stand up and all of a sudden you're a lot colder than you were kneeling because and it happens, and you're like, you're cold and it's raining, and you're trying to get a tarp up and get a fire going or a stove lit or what have you. It's those times you make those mistakes, unless you've got it drilled into your head that I always do it like this with no exceptions. And
do you know Jed Yarnold?
I've never met him. One of my friends has done trips with him. Steve Suggett did some trips with him back when he was working with Andy Wood at Bushcraft Expeditions. So yeah, I know of him. And Ray Goodwin, who we were talking about before we got on air, he knows Jed, and Jed had some packs that he had specially made that had all sorts of attachments and tied in really well. Ray's got some of those as well. So I know of him, and I know, I know people who've been on trips with him, but I've never actually met him myself. No.
He's although he's 30 years older than me, he's a really close friend. Maybe he's 30 years. Actually, Jed, if you're watching this, I don't think you're 30 years older than me. I'm just doing the maths, more like 2025. But he's got this thing, and when I first started, and Jed used to work for me, and we've worked together, we've been on trips together, and he's got this thing where he creates almost like rhymes to teach by. And so he creates firelighting into a rhyme that's like, I strike this, and then I rhythmically put the knife back where it belongs, and then the ferro rod, and then everything is in this rhyme. And when he first started teaching it like that, I was like, this guy is nuts. Like, who let this eccentric guy come out and do this stuff? And I actually think it was with clients that are booked on through my business, and I'd employ Jed, and I just happened to show up to the teaching place in the woods where where he was teaching. And I'm like, I don't think, geez, what's going to happen? Anyway, 2 years later, I was guiding a canoe trip in Sweden, just south of the Arctic Circle, near Östersund, if you've probably been in that neck of the woods. And one of those clients turned up, and Chris said, I'll light the fire. And I was like, okay, cool, no worries. And we'd already spoken about it. And then I hear Chris going through this like almost fire lighting nursery rhyme. And it had like drilled in this rhythmical way of ensuring that everything came out in the right order. The task was achieved in the right order, but equally everything went back to the right place at the right time. And it was a bit like we both could recite Humpty Dumpty now if we had to, because when we were kids, it was sort of that level. And then I was like, maybe that's just genius.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah.
It's very interesting. Another thing I picked up a few years ago is somebody was coaching and they were using Once Upon a Time Till They All Lived Happily Ever After as almost a trip preparation, wilderness living sort of preparation thing. And so you do that. Once upon a time, 5 mates went out hiking in the mountains, and then, somebody broke their ankle. Who had the first aid kit? And you play the what ifs until eventually everybody all lives happily ever after. And I found that another genius way, because you're right. People get excited by the, I've made a flame. And then they forget everything else. And I suppose as practitioners or teachers, educators, we've got to find a way of helping them stick that other stuff in their head. So when it matters, they don't just drop everything because they're now warm because the fires are light, even though the ferro rod's underneath the fire. I mean, do you have any strategies that you get people to use to remember to put the right stuff in the right place at the right time? Or
other than just coaching them, other than, I think one of the things to do with skills that can be combined is to break them down into component parts. So, work on getting a spark to start off with, work on getting the spark onto what you want to light and get that thing lit. And then when you can do that, then work on taking it into an established fire, break it down into component parts and sort of help them with each part. And that does a couple of things. One is that it isn't them trying to think about everything all at once. They've already practiced making a spark, and they can do that. They've already practiced making a spark and getting onto a piece of birch bark. They can do that. And now they can focus on the other things. And it gives them a bit more mental bandwidth to A, listen to what you're telling them at that point, and B, think about maybe some of the other things that they need to do around that. And then again, just gently reminding them, where's the matchbox? Yeah, where should it be? Okay, yeah, right. And just keep doing that. And after a while, they'll do that. But I like the nursery rhyme thing. And I guess in some ways it's no different. I've never learned to parachute, but I've watched plenty of documentaries about people learning to parachute. And there's that. It's quite simple, a lot of the things that they have to do in terms of counting, check canopy, do all these sorts of things. And it's just having those simplified systems that cover the most important things that you need to remember to do. A friend of mine is a BA pilot. And again, they have to certify in terms of their drills, their safety drills and emergency drills on simulators very regularly, every 6 or 12 months, depending what it is they're doing. And then they go through mentally their checklist, and they're simple checklists. And then the co-pilot goes through he opens the book on the right page, and that checklist is there, and they double check. But I think that's the skill. It's identifying what the important things are that you need to remember how to do, and then coming up with a simple enough checklist that you can remember it, but also that it covers the important things. It's not so simple that you actually miss out some of the important points. So that's what I like about this sort of nursery rhyme approach that you're talking, is that it's a way of remembering a checklist, because checklists can be a bit tedious. They're dry and they're abstract. And I think one of the good things about turning it into a nursery rhyme or a story is that we're very good at remembering stories. And so I think that's I like that. If you can teach something as a story, and I do that in some of my teaching, you can sort of use examples. And again, one of the things about Ray Goodwin, and I think it's true of quite a lot of people who've been in the game for a long time. If you look at really experienced coaches, the young guns get annoyed because the old guys are sat around telling stories all the time. But there's a lot of learning in those stories, and you tend to remember the stories. You don't remember the young guy saying, okay, now do this, do A, B, C, but you remember the older guy telling you the story about his mate Bill who did this stupid thing. And you remember the story. Because we didn't used to write things down. We used to have to remember everything, and we're very good at remembering stories. That's how oral traditions came about, So I think there's a lot of value in trying to use story in amongst your teaching and your coaching when you're teaching people outdoor skills, even if it's just examples of how to do things right, examples of tales of woe, when people didn't do things, because people remember them. They add color around the learning, and I think that's important too. So
I was in a discussion with a American outdoor educator, Todd Johnson Wright. He's a kayaking dude in Vermont, works at one of the universities there, and we were saying the other day that the art of outdoor education is to be an entertainer, and to get people to remember things, really, you have to engage them with moments of immense pain and moments of immense pleasure. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go and put them through some really painful experience. It can just be the story of so-and-so was here and did X, and the result was catastrophic. And people are like, whoa, I won't do that. And then it'll stick in their head. So we got to the point of, are we really educators, or are we actually entertainers first and educators second? What is it? What's that special blend that makes Ray Goodwin, or Paul Kirtley? Because if we were just factual the entire time, I don't think people would come back.
No, and I think it's one of the things. It's one of the areas that I've found I've had to work on, because, as I said to you before, I did mathematics at university, and I can be quite logical and a bit dry. Which is good in some ways, because don't get me wrong, I get as irritated and angry about certain things as the next person, so I do have emotional responses to things, but I tend to be quite good in situations that require clear thinking. And if I can try and impart some of those thought processes into other people as well, I think that's useful for them. But yeah, in terms of my teaching, I've had to learn not to just kind of do a brain dump of all the things that I know about a certain subject and expect people to remember them, because the other thing that people tell me is I've got a very good memory, and so I don't often need people telling me things twice. If I'm interested, I'll remember. But I've found over the years of teaching people that not everyone's the same. You need to engage people in different ways in order for the lesson that you're trying to impart to sink home with them. And for some people, it's just doing it repeatedly. Other people, they need to go away and think about it. You know the theory, but that's the way it's borne out in practice. And I think as an educator, as a coach, or what have you, you need to understand the different roles you need to play in order to optimize their learning. And I think being entertaining and is another way of engaging people you shouldn't always be deadly serious about everything. People should have fun. If they're having fun, then they're learning typically as well. So
that's it. They just might not be learning what you want them to or expect them to.
Well, sometimes you have to be more directive. It's like when you're leading a trip, sometimes you can be very like, go and play, figure out how to do this, figure out how to get down this. Other times it has to be, you go there, you stay still, you throw that rope over that. It depends on the situation, and you need to understand when, as a leader, you need to switch between those different mindsets and those different personas, as it were. So
yeah, I've got a friend who works in the outdoors, and he says that to be great in the outdoors as a coach, leader, guide, you need to have the head of a nuclear physicist and the face of a clown. Because if your clients honestly knew what was going on in your head the entire time, they might not like it. And so you've got to have like this mask that you can put on that goes, yeah, we're going to take this risk and it might go horribly wrong, but I think I've got it sorted. I'm just going to tell you all the positive stuff to look for and not the worrying stuff, and we'll be all good.
Well, yeah, I mean, that works on a very basic psychological level. I mean, we've probably all ridden a bicycle. Most people will have ridden a bicycle at some point who are listening to this. And if you're cycling along, whether it's along the sidewalk, whether it's along the road, whether it's down a trail, if there's something you don't want to hit, like if you look at it, you will hit it. Like if it's a rock in the middle of the trail, or, a pothole in the street, or what have you. If you just focus on that thing you don't want to hit, you're going for it. Yeah. So if you're, mountain biking down a trail and there's a rock in the middle of the trail, you want to look where you're going. And it's the same with, paddling. It's like, you don't want to look at the rock you don't want to hit. You want to look at the bit of water you want to be on and get there. And I think there is definitely value in that. When you definitely want people to be on the piece of water, not hitting the rock, get them to focus on where you want them to be rather than the thing where you really don't want them to hit. So on a very, very basic level, that's true. Yeah. And then you get into the land of worry as well. If someone's stressed and they're not an unconscious, performer at the level they need to be, if it needs to be a conscious performance of whatever they're doing, you don't want them super stressed, because their ability to undertake the move you want them to take will break down. And so you want them to be as relaxed as possible. You want them to be alert and aware of what you want them to do, but you don't want them to be so stressed that they can't actually do the paddle strokes that they could have done if they weren't so stressed. So there's a lot of psychology going on there, as well as just, just hiding the risk. It's also, you're doing your best as a leader and a coach to get them to perform to their maximum ability in the context. Yeah.
Yeah, and recognizing that changes. Have you ever heard of Accident Wednesdays?
No, it might be something that I've heard of a similar story, but carry on. Go on. Tell me.
Before I set up my outdoor business in the UK, which was admittedly about 16 or 17 years ago, I worked a lot in local authority outdoor education centres in the UK. I managed a few, and one of the things when the Adventure Activities Licensing Agency came around is they go and look at all of your accidents, and they start doing data tracking of what happened when. And in those residential centres where typically kids rock up on a Monday morning and they go home on a Friday afternoon, most of the accidents happen on a Wednesday. And it's and then when you lead trips as well, you can keep people safe over a weekend, but the moment you try and keep them doing something onto a Monday, for instance, or on a expedition, the third day, people are suddenly stepping outside of what their comfort zone is in terms of the exercise they're doing, the environment they're in, the sleep they're getting or not getting, the booze they've consumed or not consumed, so on and so forth. And often that third day or Wednesday is when most of the accidents happen. So it's then recognizing, well, maybe that needs to be a different flavor of day to ensure that people have a smile at the end of the day, as opposed to a fracture or something weird.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I've heard of something. I've heard of that in a different way. Absolutely, yeah. It's that initial kind of attention and alertness and what have you. It goes off. The other flip that I remember watching a documentary years ago about NASA's space program. They never used to do certain things on Mondays and Fridays in terms of testing certain things. Certain ejector seat systems or various things, because that was when people were still thinking about what they did at the weekend. They weren't quite, or maybe they were hungover from Sunday night or whatever the reason, but they weren't quite sharp on Monday. And then on Friday, they were maybe thinking about knocking off or having to pick the kids up from the school or going fishing that weekend or what have you. So there were certain critical tests that they never did on Mondays and Fridays, and they reduced their failure rate, their accident rate quite significantly by doing that, So it's just being aware of people's psychology again, isn't it?
It's, yeah. And I often wonder when we train outdoor practitioners in any discipline, whether or not we do that topic enough justice. It always feels like it ends up being too technical, tactical orientated, as opposed to, the technical tactical stuff really is quite simple and pragmatic to learn. As you said, it's almost mathematic. It's logical. It's often 2 + 2 will make 4. But getting somebody to consistently do 2 + 2 in a way that's artful and skillful and repeatable in multiple conditions, that really is the trick to producing great students. And that really is head game stuff.
It is. And it's also, a simple way initially. And again, we're kind of getting into sort of paddle sport coaching again, is just giving people that varied practice, that you teach them a particular technical skill, and then you get them to practice, I don't know, just an eddy turn on a particular eddy, but then you go somewhere else down the river and you get them to do the same thing. And maybe the line of the eddy's wider or narrower, or it's going at a different angle. And they've got to, it's the same principle, what they're trying to achieve, what they're trying to do with the boat and what the water's doing fundamentally, but the details are different, and they've got to vary their practice. And that gives them more robustness in their ability to then go and do something unseen, because they've got that more nuanced experience. And that's something I try and bring into the bushcraft training that I do as well, is that after a while, you need to give people different challenges, different materials. They may be well practiced with one particular type of wood, but okay, let's try a different type of wood. Let's try doing this in a different way. Let's try making it bigger, try making it smaller. Let's use a different material altogether. And you're still achieving the same thing, but you're giving them a variety of different materials. Again, we go back to firelighting. It's such a fundamental skill set. And, it's the thing that really separates us from the other animals on the planet. As far as we know, we're the only animal that can create and control fire. And that's probably one of the reasons we're sat here talking over the internet halfway around the world almost, because we've built technology on top of the fact we can burn stuff. That's really opposable thumbs, and the fact that we can set fire to things has got us a long way. And in terms,
it's the only difference between you, me, and a chimp.
It is. If you think about your
manage fire.
Okay, we're moving more onto electric cars now, but if you think about your vehicle, it's just a tin box with a fire under the bonnet. That's what it is. Yeah. With some clever mechanics in between. So, that ability to light fire is key. It allows us to move outside and operate in much colder and damper environments than we could do otherwise. And our clothing's important in that respect as well. So fire is one of the key things that we teach in bushcraft. It's a key survival skill, unless you're trying to be totally stealthy and tactical and whatnot. But it's a key survival skill, and yet you get people who've done bow drill, I don't know, for example, once, and they're like, yes, I've mastered bow drill. It's like, no, you haven't. You know, you've got an ember. That's great. That's a good start. Okay, now let's get an ember consistently with that species of wood. Yeah, make a new set, make a fire, burn that set, get some more of the same species. Can you do it consistently? Okay, now you can do it consistently with that species. Now go and get a different species of wood and do it with that, and then do it consistently, and then get another species, because they're all different. Even within a species, you get variation, and from willow to alder to pine to birch to spruce, etc. They're all different in the way that they feel when you're trying to make fire with them. And when you can do all of that, maybe you can start to say, yeah, I'm getting quite good at that, you know. But again, it's that story for you. Go on. It's that varied practice again. It's just that allows you then to grab a piece of material that you've never used before and stand a good chance of setting fire with it. Otherwise, if you've just done it with one type of material once, you're on a hiding to nothing. The next time you get something that's slightly different, it's outside of your experience altogether. So
it's a fluke. The first time's a fluke. The second time and third time is where you're proving that it's not a fluke.
Yeah.
So when I first moved to South Africa, I've obviously spent my childhood was not too dissimilar to yours, apart from I was in the Scouts, and I had a really unique scout troop who didn't do much scouting other than building shelters, going camping, climbing crags, and lighting fires. I mean, that was pretty much my scout troop. And so I moved to South Africa 7 or 8 years ago, and I thought, right, that's it. I'm going to go and take all of that stuff that I've learned and known in the Northern Hemisphere and New Zealand, which includes fire by friction. And I'm not an expert. I can do it all right. And I'm going to go and do it here. So I took myself to a wilderness area about 5 hours north of Joburg, called the Volksburg Mountains. Stunningly beautiful, huge, amazing. No footpaths. You just wander off into mountains and ridges for 5 or 6 days, or as long until you get bored and try and find your way back again.
Sounds terrible.
It's incredible. No phone reception. It's where I disappear in South Africa when I need to disappear.
Uh-huh.
And if the police want me, you didn't hear that.
Okay.
Anyway,
I won't tell anyone.
That's it. So I end up in this valley, full of this wooded valley, and I thought, right, okay, I'm going to spend 2 nights here, and I'm going to see how fire by friction works here in South Africa, because it's got to be different. And we're stupid as human beings on occasions, because I spent the first morning grumpily looking for wood that I would recognize, and I frankly found nothing. Would be the short answer of what I found in terms of wood that I would recognize. And so then I had lunch and I had a hot chocolate, and I frankly was just grumpy for the afternoon. And something after when I woke up the following morning sparked in my head and said, what are some of these principles of things that you're looking to achieve? So would I, for instance, in this valley, if I was in a valley in Sweden, what sort of wood would I find at the base of the valley near a watercourse? And often that would be a silver birch or something of that nature. And would I try and light fire with silver birch? Well, if it was dry enough, maybe I could give it a go, but probably not. I'd probably look for something harder, denser, so on and so forth. And then I started thinking, well, I was lying in my sleeping bag with a tent door open. I'll never forget it, on my thermarest, looking up, and I'm thinking, well, what wood do I want, and where would you find it? And so I started thinking, well, okay, sun-baked would be good. Further away from water, but still able to grow, probably would be harder and more weather resistant. And when I went back to principles, I still to this day have almost no idea the name of the wood or the type of wood that I used. But actually I achieved fire by friction, because you went back to that base point of let's have some common sense involved with this, and go back to some principles of the principles globally are not that different. It's just the trees look different.
Yeah, no, and that's an important point, and I think that's one of the things that comes out of practicing with a number of different things, is that you get to understand what the commonalities are and what makes something work and what makes something that doesn't, because there are certain woods that just won't work very well at all, if at all, like oak or hornbeam, or sweet chestnut doesn't work very well. You get lots of smoke and dust, but it's too fibrous. So, and if you got another unknown species that was doing that, you'd kind of go, yeah, that's in my experience. So you start to pick up on it. If it's too soft, if it's too hard, where might you find these things? What are the qualities? And you don't need to know the names of them to recognize those qualities. And then you can then start to apply it to completely unknown species. One of the things that I like to do on one of my courses, I've got a box full of materials that some of them are really good for taking an ember to flame, and some of them are really good at catching a spark. And many of them are from the UK, but many of them are from other parts of the world as well that I've collected. And one of the ones from Africa it's actually from Tanzania. One of the mother-in-law's tongue species, the Sanseviera. It's like a long, spiky. It's like an aloe vera, and it's got like sharp edges. And the elephants like to chew it. They chew the leaves and they spit out all the fibers that are up the middle of these leaves, and then they get these piles of chewed fibers drying in the sun. You've got a pile of fibers, great for firelighting, just lying there. But one of the things I like to do on the courses in the UK is I'll go through the local materials that we can use, and I'll tell them what it is. Like this is the outer bark of a wild honeysuckle. This is the inner bark of an oak. This is the inner bark of a sweet chestnut. You can dry this. It's fibrous. You can make it into like a bird's nest, put an ember in the middle, blow it to flame, all that kind of stuff. Then I get a bunch of other stuff out that isn't from the locality, and I'm go, okay, well, what's this? And they're like, I don't know. So I've got some of this mother-in-law's tongue kind of elephant chewed fibers, and I pass them around and they're trying to figure out what they are. And then I've got some coconut husk, and I've got some of the fibers that grow on the bottom of palms. And I've got various lichens from around the world, like beard lichens off trees and things. But they all have similar qualities. They're all very fine. They're all quite fibrous. They're all like hair-like and thin, and you can break them down into really small fuel. And that's what it is that allows you to take that glowing ember, whether that's from a bow drill or a hand drill, or taking a magnifying glass onto a piece of elephant dung and getting it smoldering. However you create that smoldering thing, you then need something to turn it into a fire. And again, you don't need to know what it is. You just need to recognize the qualities it has to have, and then you can apply those principles that you know. But it's sometimes really hard to draw out those principles at first, because people want to know specifics, and you have to teach them the specifics. But then if you can over time draw out those principles, so that then they're really portable, those skills.
Yeah, it was a really big eye opener for me that morning when I was lying there. It's you have those moments that you don't forget easily, and it was just a little bit of an aha moment for me. Yeah, that's cool. So let's head back towards more bushcrafty stuff. I asked you about the definition maybe of bushcraft, or the question wasn't that simple. You mentioned—
The answer wasn't simple.
The answer wasn't simple either. But who cares? It's the Rob and Paul show. Why worry about it? You used the words or used the phrase. It was about making yourself at home in the outdoors. So a lot of our listeners will be off on a canoe trip to camp overnight, or a backpacking trip to go and do a few nights out, or any of the above. What is it that you do to make, like you're on a Spey, you're going down the River Spey in a canoe, or you're in Algonquin. What is it that you do to make the camp more homely for yourself using your bushcraft skills?
The fundamental thing there really is, I think fire is important, particularly if you're paddling, and unless you're in a season when there's a fire ban on, and you got to be extremely careful then, of course. But one of the things I think really puts a center to a camp, and it doesn't need a bushcraft instructor to tell people this, it is a campfire. It just gives an immediate focus and center to the camp, and that's a psychological thing, and it's something that we can all relate to, I think. But then I think particularly if you're paddling on those cold, damp days, maybe the kind of shoulder seasons in the northern places. I've been on canoe trips in Algonquin when I've hardly seen anybody around at all, and it snowed on the last day of our trip, you know, because we're right at the end of the season. Or you might be out in the spring when the water's really cold and you're kneeling in the boat and you can feel the cold coming up through the boat, and you get off the water on those days and there's a chill in the air and it's damp and you've been a bit chilly all day. And a fire's more than just a psychological thing then. It really does help you kind of warm through, get clothing dry and all that sort of stuff. So I think fire skills are important. And then the other simple thing is a lot of people are really worried about having fires underneath tarps. But one of the things that a fire under a tarp does is, even though it's open-sided, is that you get a nice little convection current going. You know, so you get the warm air from the fire going up, but then it bounces off the tarp, it's trapped and it recirculates. And that makes a huge difference on a cold, or it's nothing to do with the rain either. I mean, of course, a tarp helps when it's raining, particularly if it's a cold, rainy day. A tarp with a fire makes a huge difference. But I'm just talking about a cold, damp day when it's not necessarily raining. Just having the tarp up over the fire and sitting, you get the radiant heat of the fire, but then you've also got that warm convection current of air going up and around. It makes a real big difference to your comfort level. The other thing it makes a big difference to is that you don't tend to need such a big fire. If you're just out in the open and it's cold, you tend to need to burn a lot more wood. And just to kind of get, because it's all about direct heat. All of that other heat is going off up into the atmosphere somewhere. It's off on a convection current, you know, meters and meters above where you are. Whereas if you put that tarp over the top, it traps it. So then you don't need as much fuel, which means you can spend more time near the fire rather than running around the woods trying to find stuff to burn. And in places like Algonquin, where some of the campsites don't have a lot of immediately available firewood on them, you're not having to sort of paddle off to a muskeg somewhere to saw wood up and bring it back, and, you know, or as much as you would otherwise. So I think there's a comfort thing there, but there's also an efficiency thing going on there as well. And I think one of the things that the campcraft end of bushcraft really helps you with is efficiency. You know, at the end of the day, you want to get into camp, you want to get comfortable when you get warm and dry and cook your meal, and you don't want to waste a lot of time. And it's quite interesting. I won't mention any names, but Ray and I we do a spey trip every year. We do a couple of river spey trips, and we had some younger guys who are, or they certainly were at the time, they all had their own YouTube channel, and they came along and did a river spey trip with us. And they took a long time to set their camp up because they were used to going out in the woods, and all they had to do was film setting their tarps and hammocks up, and quite complex systems for setting things up. And if I get annoyed about anything, it's that kind of end of sort of YouTube bushcraft. These guys are great. I don't get annoyed with them. But the point is there's this kind of proliferation of, you know, overly complicated ways of doing things that get sort of bolted onto the word bushcraft. And for me, a lot of it's about making it as simple as possible. That sort of Occam's razor sort of approach of just like everything's pared down to as simple as it can be. Because what you know as well as I do, when you're doing a trip, you need to be efficient with the things that sit around the journeying part of the trip. And so to me, the elegance of the bushcraft and the campcraft in the context of a journey is the efficiency around those things, not rolling around like a pig in muck, tying 27 different knots to put your hammock up. You want it up and done and your dinner on so that you can actually get in the hammock and rest so that you're fresh for the next day. The point isn't to spend loads of time on tarp knots and hammock setups and knobbing around with whatever it is that you want to knob around with when you're making a YouTube video and you've got nothing else to do. The point is to get into camp, get stuff set up, get the fire on, get the tarp up, get the kettle on, get some food and some hydration into people, and allow them to rest. And so for me, when I'm on a journey, the bushcraft really is about doing those things efficiently, making a tripod efficiently, getting a fire made efficiently, cooking efficiently, getting water boiled, and doing those things well and in a slick fashion rather than wallowing around doing them very inefficiently. So it's not the most technical end of bushcraft. You know, we're not feeding ourselves from a wide range of, you know, different wild edibles or making traps or making nets or any of those other things that I could teach people to do. But it's about doing the basics really well on a journey, I think. So
I often think that some bushcraft people and could would benefit from going and working as a commercial guide somewhere, like a canoe guide or a mountain guide, where, especially in North America, where you earn a lot of your money through tips, there's a direct correlation in my mind between how quickly you can get your clients into camp, you can get a fire going, a tarp up, and something hot in front of them, like a drink or food. There's a direct, how quickly you can do that is directly linked to how much tip they give you at the end of the trip. And if you faff around with it for hours, doing the world's most beautiful Boy Scout, 150% brilliant knots, and it takes you 2 hours, you normally have grumpy clients, and safety goes down and the size of your tips go down at the same time. I think there's a lot to be learned from that.
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be good. It doesn't need to be sloppy, but it needs to be quick and efficient. And it's that middle path that's really important. Yeah.
Awesome. So we've covered a lot about the past. We've spoken quite a lot about the present, but the bit about present we haven't spoken about is the impact of COVID in the outdoors, in the business. What's been going on for you? What do you see as the going on for you may well end up being the negative side of things, but could there be any positive things from this?
It's an interesting question. I think, so for me, just relate my experience last year in 2020 is that I had a great start to the year. I was in Australia over Christmas and New Year. As I mentioned, my partner's from Australia. I went and visited with Les Hiddins, the bush tucker man, while I was down there. Went up to Queensland and spent a bit of time with him. I met up with another friend of mine, Gordon Deadman, from who has Bushcraft Survival out Australia. He's got a YouTube channel, but he's also got a little bushcraft school out there as well. And he's a good bloke. And I spent a bit of time working on my Aussie tree and plant ID and stuff down there as well. So that was great. Then I came back. I did some stuff with my own team in the woods in the UK and some staff development stuff in January. And then I went off to Canada in early Feb, went to see what went on the Karamat winter course, which was good with Kelly Halton and those guys. And then went off and spent some time with Ross Hinter of the Alberta's Trapper Association, just to learn a bit more about some aspects of fur trapping that I know nothing about, frankly. And I was interested to learn. Not that I want to run a trap line, but I was just interested to spend time with somebody who really knew what they were doing there. And I'd met Ross at the Global Bushcraft Symposium in Alberta in 2019. So it was good to go back and spend some time with him. And then I came back, and that was the end of February when I came back. And it was really, like, even when I'd flown through Singapore to and from Australia, there was starting to be some rumblings about COVID. People more wearing masks more than normal. I mean, you often see people wearing masks in Asia anyway, particularly in the winter, but more than normal. And then when we came back from Canada, it was definitely something's going on, and more and more people are wearing masks and more people are concerned. And then within weeks, it was lockdowns in the UK and whatnot. And so at that point, I was very much into getting ready to run our UK course season. We normally start around Easter time, late March, early April. The days are long enough that we can have really nice, full day programs and whatnot. Around about the equinox, you've got, 12 hours of daylight. So that's when we tend to start teaching our courses, because we don't like to have short days on our courses. We like, full days where people are fully engaged with what we're doing, get the money's worth. So that's normally when we start. And clearly, I think the lockdown started like the week before we were supposed to start running courses. And we just had to kind of go into, we can't do a lot of this stuff. And we lost 4 months of program, so end of March through to mid-August. We couldn't do a trip in Canada that we had planned. And we've moved all of that to 2021, which seemed like a good idea at the time, but we'll see. Things are not going in the right direction for us at the moment. So I had a lot of time then. And so I'd finished my book already, but it allowed me to do some of the to and fro with the editors on my book a bit more rapidly than because they knew I should have been out for 2 or 3 week blocks. And so we had a schedule where it was like, well, Paul's not going to be around, so we need to get that version that's been through the copy editor back to him that week, so he can go through the changes. He can come back to us, and so we had this sort of slightly stretched out thing with my book, and we were able to cover some of that stuff off more quickly, which was good because I was in the woods less and in front of a machine, in front of a computer more, and I could get that stuff done. So that was a bonus. I could get more of that sort of stuff done more quickly. I have a couple of online courses. I have an online tree and plant identification course, which focuses on the northern temperate and boreal for Eurasia and North America. I normally only open that in January, and it's a 12-module course with a module per month and some webinars and self-study over the course of a year. I reopened that in April because people were sat at home. They were, on furloughed, or they were working from home, or they weren't doing the things they could normally do. But the way that course is structured, people can go out and study. They apply what the principles, again, back to principles, they apply the principles that they learn on the course, and they go and practice them with whatever is in their locality. Even if they're in town, they can walk along a canal or walk along in the local park and use what they're learning to identify what's there. And so that was something I'd never done before. I've run that course for 7 years, and I reopened it in April and had quite a few people sign up then, which was good for us, because it made up for some of the income we'd lost from running the other courses, the field courses, but also good for people to have something meaningful to do during that time, and now that we got to the end of the year and they've got access to the full program and, the module a month, I had quite a few emails in December of people saying that really kept me sane this year, with the lockdowns and having to teach my kids at home and, not being able to go out on camping holidays or whatever it is that they normally do that they haven't been able to do. Just that kind of regularity of going out and spending a bit of time for themselves, still feeling like they're connected with nature, still feeling like they were learning and developing. That's been really important to some people. So for me, that was nice to be able to, facilitate that. But then we did have this little window in September and October when things were relaxed over here in terms of the lockdowns and the restrictions. And I did run courses in late August and September, and people were absolutely just over the moon about being able to get out. Everyone had cabin fever at that point, and just being able to come out. And we had socially distanced camps, people spread out when we were doing things. We had people coming one by one for food, not kind of all huddling, and just doing what we could. Lots of hand washing, extra hand gel, extra hygiene's always important in the woods. When you've got an expedition style camp, you need people to wash their hands all the time anyway. If they're scrubbling around in the dirt for roots and making things, they need to wash their hands before they're eating and preparing food. And if they're skinning rabbits and whatnot, they need to wash their hands, they need to wash their knives. Hygiene's always important, but we had more social distancing. And even though it was a bit weird and a bit staid, and a bit kind of standoffish, people just really appreciated being out. So I think one of the good things that might come out of this is that I think people will appreciate those things a little bit more. I think maybe we took them for granted before, and now when we haven't had them, when we get back to the point where we can go out and socialize around a campfire and just be normal again, hopefully at some point, then I think people will savor those things. Maybe they'll be a little bit sweeter than maybe they ever were before. And we ran a few programs in Scotland as well, and we're able to run in October before that all got closed down again in terms of not being able to cross the border into Scotland and whatnot. And we ran a couple of canoe trips, and we did our forest hunter course. And again, socially distanced camps, lots of extra hand washing, probably over the top, but we did everything that we could to make sure that transmission, people wearing masks and all sorts of things, and when we're indoors at the beginning and the end of trips and all those sorts of things, in line with the government guidance at the time. But again, being out on the river, it's easy to socially distance in a canoe on a river, of course. Being out in the river, being in camp, people just appreciated being out in the fresh air and being around other people who also appreciated those things. So I think once we come out the other side of this, people will fully appreciate that and not take it for granted if they ever did in the first place. So yeah.
I remember, and I don't know if you remember this, well, you probably do actually, but 18 or so years ago, I think it was 18 or so years ago, we had a big foot and mouth outbreak in the UK.
I do remember, yeah.
And the UK countryside got just shut down. And I remember taking myself off the day the countryside reopened. I took myself off to the Brecon Beacons. I was living and working in Berkshire at the time, and disappeared off to the Beacons for a day just to go for a wander in the hills. I think it was the Beacons. I think it was the Black Mountains, actually. And I think the countryside had been pretty much shut down for 8 months or something like that. It was quite a while.
Was it 2001, wasn't it? The worst year, I think, or 2002, 2001. Yeah, something because like that. Going back to my initial story, I remember because those were the years when I was doing a lot of Woodlore courses with Ray Mears as a student. And I remember a lot of the courses that I had booked had to be moved. The venue had to be moved because some of the venues, the access to them was just closed down because of foot and mouth. And we ended up for a couple of courses on the scout campsite at Broadstone Warren because that was still open. And so I remember doing a tracking course there and something else. Maybe it was an outdoor cookery course. I can't remember now, but a couple of courses I did that year, and I'm pretty sure it was 2001. We were there, but then a year off, maybe a couple of years later, there was another scare, wasn't there, where certain areas of the country was closed down, and I was working for Ray Mears at that point, and I remember that there were some issues again around our camps being in some places that were closed down because of foot and mouth. Yeah, it was quite a tricky time, and when you're in the middle of those things, it feels like it's never going to end. It's very, particularly if you're running a business that's affected by them, it feels like it's never going to end, and it's very stressful. But clearly those things, I can't even remember what year it was now, it's kind of a dim and distant memory in some ways. So let's hope this will be the same in 20 years time. It'll just be a dim and distant memory.
I remember that day in the Black Mountains because I remember that the footpath that I'd walked many times before, for the first time ever, had grass growing in the footpath, as opposed to just being a typical PT Black Mountain, Brecon Beacon, the usual thing that's almost entrenched. Well, it is entrenched. And I thought then, maybe there's been some benefits from this. And I remember then I also took up sea kayaking then because you could still go kayaking on the sea. You couldn't go hiking, climbing, do anything else, but you could still get out on the sea. And it's funny that then years later, I earned quite a lot of my living out of coaching sea kayaking, thanks to foot and mouth. And I often think Tony Robbins, the motivational coach speaker dude, often says, you don't have to ask why this is happening to me. You have to ask it why it's happening for me. And I wonder with the outdoors and where we are now, if we were to ask, why does this happen for us? I wonder in a few years' time how our answers will adapt and change and what answers we'll actually come out with. And maybe it just is more people get in the outdoors and respect it now because they were told they couldn't and now they can. I don't know, but I just wondered what it was from your perspective.
Well, it's interesting. I've, on a smaller scale, I've seen a few things where people have said, and this isn't necessarily good for gyms, but, a lot of people have said, I've got so used to exercising outside now, doing what I can. I'm never going to go back to a gym. There's all those little minor changes as well that, the only thing a lot of people have been able to do in their local area is go out for a walk once a day or, go and do some, kettlebells in the back garden or whatever it is. But just being out, people have got more used to being outside and have appreciated that time, not being stuck inside all the time, even if it's a small thing every day. And, that might then build into something more for some people. So yeah, it's interesting how these little changes take people off in big different, changes in direction. So.
Well, maybe we'll find the next Paul Kirtley, Rob Yates, Ray Goodwin, or anybody else come out of this. They suddenly get inspired and off they go. Somebody has to fill our shoes one day, I suppose.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Clients often said, why do you do what you do? I say, I do what I do to make myself redundant. My job's to produce more of me so that I don't have to do what I do and you can go and do it for me.
Well, they're always the best instructors, people who think like that, and I used to do a lot of martial arts back in the day. I used to run a jiu-jitsu dojo for a while, not to the level of, some of the, guys, martial arts has come a long way, with UFC and the Brazilian jiu-jitsu and, that's kind of proliferated a lot. But, I used to do a fair amount back in the day. And the best instructors are always people who wanted you to do things better than they could do them. You know, the bad instructors in anything are the people who kind of want to take your money, but don't really want you to get that good. You should always be aiming to get your students to at least your level, if not beyond. It's fantastic when you have a student that is so enthused and capable and just lapping it all up and practicing in their own time. That's wonderful to work with. And, you know, I've had the, you know, occasion to have a few students like that. And I've also had, you know, I've had some people that I've worked for or with in the past who are quite tight about their knowledge in certain areas. And I sometimes wonder why they're involved in teaching if they don't want to share stuff. You know, you get, you know, I don't want to name people's names, but, you know, and it's not just in my experience, I've heard other people's stories where, you know, they go to a famous instructor, whatever it is, whether it's martial arts or outdoor skills or what have you. And they're like, ask them some questions that build on what they're doing on that course. And they're like, oh, you'll have to come back, you know, you have to come and do the advanced course for that. And you're never going to get somebody to come and do the advanced course. You're more likely to say, well, okay, I'll tell you, I'll explain it to you. And by the way, you should come and do the advanced course, because then you'll get to do even more of this. And so even just from a basic business point of view, I just don't understand that closed mentality. If you're going to put yourself in a position where you're teaching, you should be very willing to share what you know and encourage people to get better than you are, as you say, and then you're redundant.
I interviewed a guy called John O'Regan, an Irish guy. He's actually a ultra marathon runner. The other day, and I asked him how he got into ultra marathon running, and the link for this you'll appreciate. So he was one of Ray's students in Woodlore for quite a while, and possibly in and around the same time you were, actually. That's an interesting thing. And he'd never really been into running or anything like that. And he did one of Ray's Scandinavian winter courses. And I don't know which one, but he sat at the airport and talking to Ray. And Ray made a passing comment to him that he really loves getting postcards from students that have gone on to do really cool things. And John got on the plane to fly back to Dublin, back home. And something there on that plane journey, the Marathon des Sables, popped into his consciousness for some reason. He's like, well, Ray said he really likes getting postcards from people who do adventurous things. And I've always fancied doing an ultra marathon and doing running. He was 30 at the time. And it was that postcard thing from Ray was the thing that set him about becoming now one of the world's best ultra runners. You know, he's off to go and do the Death Valley Run in the US next year, which is supposed to be one of the most hardcore ultra races in the world. And I often think that our job is to teach people and then set them free to go and send us postcards. Or as I often say to clients, when you go to do something really cool, please make sure you invite me.
Yeah, at least tell me about it. Yeah.
That's it. Give me the right to say, no, I don't have the time, as opposed to just disappearing. So Paul, before I steal any more of your time, the last thing on my list I want to talk to you about is you mentioned your book. We said it's coming out later this year, but what's it going to be about? Who's it for? And when should people get ready to swipe their credit cards and go get it?
Well, it's a book it's fundamentally, it came about from the syllabus of a course that I teach called the Woodcrafter course, which is fundamentally a course about axe skills. It's centered around the use of an axe. And the tagline of that course is wilderness axe skills and campcraft. And that's what we've ended up calling the book, Wilderness Axe Skills and Campcraft. So it's quite a comprehensive book in terms of axe skills for the sort of modern outdoors bushcraft person, and everything from very, very basic day-to-day use of a variety of different axes through to tree felling and splitting things and larger projects. So for sort of more semi-permanent camps and that type of thing. And then a lot of campcraft in there as well, from very simple sort of pot hanging arrangements to things that are more like the sort of voyageurs would have used on some of their trips, with multiple pot hangers and all sorts of things. And so there's a range again of teaching people techniques and principles in there that they can then combine in different ways to scale up or scale down depending on what they want. So yeah, I mean, it definitely comes from my perspective of using bushcraft and campcraft on journeys in that respect, like we were talking about before. But also equally, you can use a lot of the skills in this in a fixed camp. A lot of the day-to-day axe skills are useful in woodsheds and backyards and whatnot as well. So I do actually have I can't show you any of the contents, but I think I can. Just before Christmas, I got a what do they call them? Advanced copy. And it's not it's not out yet. It'll be closer to being out when you come out. And the reason I had this to hand, by the way, people, is that I grabbed it off the shelf because I was asked about it just before we started recording. So that's the cover. That's the book. And it's about 200 pages, 600 photographs, 40 odd thousand words. It's quite comprehensive. All the photos I've taken on trips and travels and courses and things. Some of them were taken specifically for the book, but there's a lot of real stuff in there. It isn't just one of those books where people have spent a week in the woods taking photos for a book. It's a culmination of many years of using these skills, whether it's for living in the woods while teaching courses or traveling on trips, particularly canoe trips, but also snowshoeing, winter camping trips. So it's just bringing all those things together in a very well illustrated way, because there's some great books on axe skills already out there, but a lot of them are line drawings or old black and white photos and things. And so it's a modern book on axe skills that are in many ways quite traditional, but people can use them alongside their canoe journeys, camping trips, etc., etc. So that's been a big project of mine in the last couple of years, working on that. So I'm excited to see that coming to fruition. People want to find out more, they can go to wildernissaxeskills.com. I actually set a website up so that people can get information. It's an American publisher that's publishing the book. It will be available in North America. It's Schiffer Publishing that's publishing it. So it'll be available in bookstores in North America. It'll be available on Amazon in North America, but it'll also be available in the UK and Europe, Sweden, even Japan. It's listed on Amazon Japan already. I noticed the other day. Yeah. Because I've got some students on one of my online courses who are asking how could they get hold of a copy of the book. And so I was like, I wonder if it's on, if I search Amazon Japan, my book title, and sure enough, it was there. So yeah, I was like, and then the guy was like, I don't know why I didn't think of looking on there, I order stuff from my wife, his wife's Japanese. It's like my wife and I order stuff from there all the time. And I didn't think of looking. So yeah, it's going to be widely distributed.
So in Japan, do they have axes that are made by people who used to make samurai swords, the 1,000 folds and so on and so forth? Or?
You know what? There are some Japanese carving tools which are quite different to Western carving tools. Some of them are very similar, but some of them are, different bevel angles, different bevel shapes, but, they work for them. But I'm sure that the techniques are not necessarily tool specific. So, yeah.
Awesome. Listen, Paul, we're going to have to love you and leave you. And
no worries.
If I could ask for a rematch at some point in time, I'd be really
certainly.
keen.
I feel like we've only just got started. There's a lot more we could have talked about. So
I know we're 2 hours in already, and I realize that some people don't like listening to long form interviews, and 2 hours can be a bit long for some people. So if you've survived this long and you're listening, congratulations. Paul, we'll have a rematch. I've got questions for you about living in the Arctic Circle in the middle of winter in the boreal forests and learning from African tribes people. And now I know you've been with a bush tucker man. That's a whole nother rabbit hole to wander down. So next time, let's do that and let's talk more about axes. But thank you so much for
my pleasure.
But thank you for dedicating yourself to learning so much so that you can pass it on to others. Because without people like you who can harvest this knowledge and bring it into one place, the knowledge will just get lost. And one day we'll be talking again about what yesterday was better than today, but we can't remember why. And people like you start to bring the why back into the frame. And I think that's really important. Thank you.
Well, that's kind and gracious of you. I just try and share what I know. And that's one of the things I say to young instructors. And, you know, if there are any people listening to this who want to be guides or instructors or whatnot, and people often worry, like they look at people who are well established, you know, whether it's, you know, me or Ray Goodwin or yourself or any of the other people we've talked about, and they look at the level of experience you've got, and then they kind of go, well, what have I got to share? And it's like, well, you've got to share what you know, and there's probably someone that's 2 steps behind you that doesn't know what you know and that would benefit from knowing that, you know, the old hands can't teach everybody anyway. So if you know something that somebody else doesn't, then you can share that with them. And I think that's an important point. And then the other thing is as well, is that sometimes the older guys forget what it's like to be a beginner. And sometimes the younger guys are a bit closer to being a beginner and they empathize with where that new person is. So even the young guys have got a lot to offer, and I would definitely encourage people to start down this path, and you'll get to be an old waffly bloke at some point, or bloke-ess. I found it sounded very sexist. I didn't mean to be. It's like, what I meant is it's the old blokes who are waffly. I didn't mean it's only blokes who get to that point. So
that's it. I even had hair when I started this game.
I've got crazy lockdown hair. That's why I haven't got my light on, so you can't see. I've got this like, and I'm not actually using these headphones. It's just to keep my hair under control.
Squeeze it in. Awesome. Folks, go and engage with Paul. Check out wildernissaxeskills.com, paulkirtley.co.uk, and go stalk him on every other social media platform because you're likely to find him.
Yeah, say hi somewhere. Say that you heard of me from this great podcast, and be nice to connect with your listeners if they so choose.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. Stay awesome.
My pleasure. Thank you, Rob. Take care. Cheers.